Shabbat Shalom again. Shabbat Shalom. So a question for everyone. When do the high holidays begin? Good. That was sort of a shill in the crowd. But you weren't a plant, but you're just a great student. So Susan Longo for the win. Tisha B'Av, a lot of us likely assume that the high holidays begin at Rosh Hashanah, right? Like that's the first one, and then Yom Kippur is the second one, and that's the thing we do. We just did that, and we're done, right? Well, the high holidays actually, or I should say the high holiday season begins at Tisha B'Av. Some would even say it begins a little bit before Tisha B'Av, at a certain fast day that happens just before that by about a week. But either way, it starts usually way before we imagine that it does, or like the High Holiday Catalog from North Shore Congregation Israel says that it does, right? And how far before? 7 full weeks before. And for those that know about Tisha B'Av, what is the main... so Tisha B'Av is a holiday that observes the destruction of both temples, and it's sort of like a black hole for all bad things that have happened to Jews throughout old time. It kind of absorbs all of those holidays, or all of those markings in time. But one of the main reasons that we learn in Jewish tradition that the temples were destroyed is because of one specific action that we've talked about in any number of courses here at North Shore Congregation Israel. Anybody remember what that is? What was God punishing the Jews for doing? What'd you say? So, a form of arrogance that manifested itself in something called sinat chinam, baseless hatred, and in particular, baseless hatred of one another within your own community, in the context of Tisha B'Av, the Jewish community. So why was it that the temple was destroyed? Well, historically, the second temple was destroyed. The temples were destroyed because of different foreign powers that had come in to take over. But spiritually speaking, the Talmud says, nope, that's actually not the primary reason. The reason is because you people couldn't get along with one another. You put all of your energies into hating one another so much that it distracted you from the real existential threats, and that's what happened. So that's the context in which the High Holy Day season actually begins, the notion of the state of our relationships with one another and not being in a good place, right? So then we work our way up. We get to probably the more familiar times. Maybe some of you are familiar with the month of Elul, the month before the High Holy Days, where we're taught to practice Cheshbon HaNefesh, reflecting on ourselves, taking an inventory of our souls, so we can prepare to do the work of Teshuvah on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. So then the high holidays are over, right? Like they're over now, we're done. No, they're not. Right, one big giveaway for when you know actually at a synagogue that the holidays are over is the Torah covers change back to their normal outfits, not their fancy white outfits that they're wearing, right? So you'll see, I don't know if you can tell in there, but you'll see when we open the Ark for Aleinu, the Torahs are still wearing white. And it's after Labor Day, which lets us know that something, seriously folks, something is happening that's important. And that's that the high holidays are not over. Does anybody know when they actually end? Marins?
The gates close at Sukkot.
Which part of Sukkot? You're near there. Yep. They close at Sukkot. Good. At the end, exactly. And Lily here just said it. Ultimately, Simchat Torah. What happens on Simchat Torah? What do? We start this Torah over again, right? So lest you thought that on Rosh Hashanah it was really the new year. We're starting fresh. Lest you thought on Yom Kippur, no, now the gates closed at the end of Ne'ilah. Now it's a fresh start. Nope, it's actually not over. We're not into the real new year until we get to Simchat Torah, which in the Reform community is observed on the 8th day of Sukkot, and in every other Jewish community is observed on the day after Simchat Torah, so what would be the 9th day, right? So I just want you to kind of hold this in your mind's eye for a second and kind of bring it into your consciousness. Nearly 3 months of the Jewish year nearly a full quarter of the Jewish year is spent in the hopes of directing our consciousness, directing our energies toward the work of repair. Repairing our relationships, repairing ourselves, making ourselves better, and ideally making ourselves new. And so you might be wondering, well, what does Sukkot have to do with that? Because isn't Sukkot when we make the funny houses, it's like the Jewish Christmas, you can like decorate a thing, invite people over, shake a weird plant thing. And not everybody observes Sukkot anyway. Like clearly Yom Kippur is way more important than Sukkot, right? Not so right. If you think of the high holidays as if you were getting a doctorate in something, right? Tisha B'Av up to Rosh Hashanah is like doing your coursework and researching your thesis. Rosh Hashanah are your comps. Yom Kippur, your thesis gets turned in, but you don't defend your thesis, actually, until Sukkot. And that's the framework I want to invite us into, because this is my shameless plug to compel you, if you do not observe Sukkot in any way, to maybe try it this year in some way. Because they're still dressed up in there, which means the fulfillment of our work isn't done. And it's not to say there's not a return on the investment of our energies if we end the High Holy Days at Yom Kippur, but the invitation of Sukkot really brings it to a whole other level. So, throughout all of the season of the High Holy Days, what do you think the major ask is of us? What's the intention behind it? What is the desire of tradition for the outcome of this work we're doing to be? What do you think that is? What? I heard something.
I don't know.
It's no punishments for wrong answers. So.
I would surmise the form of tikkun olam.
Okay, great. A form of tikkun olam, repairing the world. Great. That, I think, is a totally fair, idealized result of what could come from the process. In the work of teshuvah, if we do it really well, right, what would it do to, how do I want to say this? What characteristic would we necessarily have to adopt for ourselves to actually do real teshuvah? Yeah, Helen?
I think we would have to be selfless first.
Fantastic, exactly. I wouldn't say selfless, I would use the word humility, but I think you hit it right on the head. In order to do teshuvah, it requires the humility of a person. Because to say you're sorry, to see where your faults are, to claim them, to name them, to do the work that's required, to somehow make it better, whatever that might be. And in particular, by the time we get to Yom Kippur, really we're talking about relationships with people, right? It requires incredible humility. And many of us, I mean, I don't know about you, but I take that really seriously from Tisha B'Av up through Yom Kippur. But often, I mean, again, if I'm honest, I always try to be honest, like I get home on Yom Kippur after services when Ne'ilah ends, and I am hungry and I am nasty. So all of that teshuvah that I've been doing, trying to kind of own up to if I've been mean to my husband or short-tempered with my children, a lot of times, you know, the clock starts again for me right after Yom Kippur, and I'm now accumulating, right? Which is a real failure on my part when it comes to the High Holy Days. It means that I'm not defending my thesis well, right? I just spent all this time saying, I'm gonna do this stuff, I'm gonna transform, but then how quickly, at least for me, I find myself regressing backwards, which is, I believe, exactly why we have Sukkot. What's a sukkah? Like what, besides a weird, Zev, what's a sukkah? Yeah, I know, but it's his bar mitzvah, so I'm gonna let him. But you're correct, it's a home. What's a sukkah? It's a mini house, and like, is it a legit house? No. What's it made, like what are some of its flaws? It's not a test. Yeah, it's made out of like natural products. Is its roof excellent? No, it's got not a great roof, kind of like shaky walls, right? So a sukkah, and where is a sukkah located? Outside, right? And does anybody know the rule about the roof of a sukkah? You have to be able to see light through it, specifically the stars, and feel the rain. So the roof of the sukkah, by Talmudic law, and then Maimonides comes and solidifies it, has to be bad, ineffective, truly. It is meant to be a poor barrier between you and everything, not just nature, but everything around us. Have you ever sat and been rained on before? Yeah. Is it an empowering, ego-inflating experience? Not generally, right? I mean, it is a humbling experience, actually, to be immersed in nature in that way and to be vulnerable, which is the first support in the defense of the thesis we've written, which is to physically remind us of everything that we have internally reminded ourselves or told ourselves about what we're going to try to do for the previous 2.5 months, if you've been doing that work. But there's more. Do sukkahs have doors? Not supposed to. And if they do have a door, can it have a lock? No. And who can come into a sukkah? Yes, exactly. Anyone can come into a sukkah, and in particular, we're told in the Torah portion about Sukkot, that we are commanded to not only invite guests into our sukkah, like a sukkah with no guests doesn't qualify as a sukkah. So you have to invite people, and specifically you're told to invite the stranger, the poor, the orphan, and the widow. So the vulnerable, the disenfranchised, and I'll just say, what does that mean in our context besides all of those specific categories? It also means people we don't like. If you voted for Trump, it means you're inviting your Biden voting neighbor, and vice versa. Whatever your particular viewpoints are, whatever your particular opinions are, you are obligated to include the other, the one who is strange to you. Maimonides actually says that if you don't do that, you may have satisfied your belly from eating whatever meal you ate in that sukkah, but you have desecrated the whole point of Sukkot. What is an exercise of being exposed and sitting and eating with people who are different than we are, people who we don't naturally hang out with or relate to? What do you think that would do to you, for us, I should say? Like, what's the effect of that? Yeah, Jack.
Open yourself up to other people and their feelings and their thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, it's really easy when you're not sitting at a table passing the mashed potatoes to somebody to have a very clear view of how you are good, they are not good, and it's really easy to dislike them. It's much more challenging when you are confronted and when somebody says to you, can you please pass the potatoes, and you have to, right? And not, oh, Helen, go ahead, and then I'll tell you one more thing.
I feel, I love this discussion, by the way. But I think the hardest thing in the world is what you're talking about now, is to open your door. We do it at Pesach when somebody's
Yes,
standing
correct.
at the door.
Yep.
And to bring someone in that you can share with, that you don't know anything about.
Yeah, so the hardest thing to do is to open your door to bring someone in to share with, someone whom you don't know anything about. Or maybe you do and you don't like it. Remember where Tisha B'Av began. Why is it that the temple was destroyed, the ultimate house for our people, because it housed God, says the tradition? Because of hatred of one person to another. Nobody was sitting down and passing the potatoes. By the time we get to Sukkot, this is the ultimate test. If our teshuvah has been worth anything, if our humility practices have been worth anything, then we're called upon to sit down at the table with strangers and eat with them. And if we lock our doors, then we have failed. And I would argue that that's the truth, not just at Sukkot, but every day. One final thought, because it's not just relegated to the sukkah itself. That lulav, that weird vegetation thing we shake, 4 different types of plants that are included in the lulav, the palm, the myrtle, the willow as branches, and then a very strange fruit called an etrog or a citron. Not a lemon, but like a lemon. Zev talks about it in his Devar Torah. There's lots of different stories about what the lulav represents. Different parts of a body, different calls that we need to understand about nature. The one I like the most says that each species in the lulav represents a different type of person. 4 different types of people. People who are intelligent, educated, schooled, and who behave well, who are moral. People who are educated and schooled, intelligent, but who are immoral. People who are moral, but are not educated, who are not intelligent, and the whopper, you can guess it, people who are not moral and people who are not intelligent, people who are not educated. That's a teaching from the 12th century, but then a 15th century teaching comes to say, just like we're obligated to bring all 4 species of the lulav together on Sukkot to shake them, so too are we, the Jewish people, obligated to bring all 4 types of people together. We are the ones who are told to bring them together, and until we do that, there will be no redemption for us. There is no new year. Time just continues ad nauseum in a loop. Which is why the new year doesn't really start till Simchat Torah. Ideally, until we pass that defending of our thesis. So do you have to have a sukkah to celebrate Sukkot? No. Should you have one? I'm not going to say should, but is it awesome to have a sukkah? Yes. And if you don't have a sukkah, guess who has one? North Shore Congregation Israel. And because a sukkah is by its nature open, you and anyone you know are welcome to come and fulfill the mitzvah of sitting in the sukkah during Sukkot. But I want to up the ante for you and suggest to you that if you're interested in really passing the defending of the thesis, maybe that person who used to be your friend, who now things are not so great because every time you talked about politics at dinner, it just went bad. You know that person? You know those people? Maybe this is the time to give them a call and ask if they might join you for a snack in your synagogue, sukkah, or your own. Do you have to have a lulav for Sukkot to celebrate Sukkot? Nope. If you want one, we have them here, though. You could certainly come and shake them anytime you want. But more than that, perhaps that's an invitation during Sukkot and beyond to think about what is it in your power to bring different types of people together in peace. All of these are manifestations of how we might observe Sukkot and ultimately not just defend our thesis, but actually bring that sort of repair, that sort of tikkun that Marin's mentioned initially. And it's a tikkun, a repair that comes without artifice. Remember, do you need to convene in Aspen at some sort of fancy conference with people to sit at a table and, have Elon Musk convene you around ideas and break down boundaries? No. It just requires you and another person sitting in a really poorly built structure to share some of the gifts and bounty of our world. So I hope you'll consider Sukkot. If you have questions about, hey, I want a sukkah now, I know some great sukkah dealers it's not too late. And it's actually really easy to make your own sukkah simply out of the structures that exist at your house already and some zip ties and bed sheets and some tree branches, truthfully. So give me a ring if that's interesting for you. Either way, we wish you Chag Sameach in advance and certainly Shabbat Shalom.